The terrifying tale of Darya Saltykova. Welcome to the darkest corners of history, as we unfold the gruesome tale of Darya Saltykova, an 18th century Russian noble who unleashed terror among her serfs. Grab your headphones and prepare for a chilling criminal podcast experience that you won't forget. Fellow crime enthusiasts, today our criminal podcast features a historical figure whose brutal deeds send shivers down our spines. We'll be discussing the infamous crimes of Darya Nikolaevna Saltykova, a ruthless Russian noblewoman who tortured and killed serfs under her control. I have my friend Alex joining us in this chilling storytelling session. Are you ready, friends? Let's dive deep into this macabre chapter of history. Let's begin with where it all started. Alex, can you provide some background information about Darya Saltykova?
Sure. Born in 1730, Darya Saltykova was a member of a prominent Russian noble family. After her husband's death, she inherited vast estates and numerous serfs, eventually ruling over them with an iron fist. As time went on, her cruelty and malice towards her serfs grew considerably, leading to countless instances of abuse and mistreatment. This eventually earned her the nickname Salty Chica, a term that became synonymous with a ruthless and sadistic owner. The suffering of her serfs caught the attention of Empress Catherine II, who ordered an investigation into Saltykova's actions. Consequently, she was found guilty of over 100 murders and sentenced to life in confinement. Her case notably signified the beginning of a shift in attitudes towards serfdom in Russia, eventually contributing to its decline. Despite Saltykova's incarceration, her legacy of terror persisted in the collective memory of the Russian peasantry. Her trial was not only a significant legal proceeding, but also a public spectacle that highlighted the extreme power disparity between the nobility and the serfs. For many Russians, Salty Chica came to embody the worst excesses of the feudal system. The Empress's intervention, while a decisive action against Saltykova's brutality, also underscored the autocracy's power to enforce legal boundaries for the nobility's treatment of serfs. In the decades to come, Saltykova's case would be referenced in debates advocating for the legal and social reforms prompted by the Enlightenment ideals, changes that would ultimately lead to the Emancipation Reform of 1861, freeing the serfs and ending the feudal system that had long oppressed them.
The terrifying part of this story begins here. Alex, can you tell us about her heinous actions towards the serfs?
Absolutely. Saltykova's most appalling crimes were mainly directed against young female serfs. She was notorious for brutally flogging, torturing, and disfiguring them, often to the point of death. Families lived in fear, powerless to protect their daughters from her violent wrath. Salient among her methods of torture was the chilling practice of pouring boiling water over her victims, subjecting them to extreme temperatures in the harsh Russian winters, or forcing them to consume inedible substances. As Saltykova's reign of terror continued unabated, the local population was engulfed by an atmosphere of dread. Her position of power and noble birth shielded her from immediate recourse or reprisal, allowing her cruelty to escalate further, and for some time, she remained untouchable by the law or local authorities. Saltykova's heartless indulgence in the pain of others grew exponentially, much like a fire fueled by the agony and despair of the downtrodden. Her monstrous amusement, derived from their plight, knew no bounds. It was as if she considered herself a deity, mercilessly exercising her domineering authority over these unfortunate souls, treating them as mere playthings to satiate her perverse fetishes. Deeper so, the psychological trauma she inflicted on these hapless victims was no less than the physical atrocity she unleashed. Tales of her barbarity fluttered around like sinister whispers on the wind, serving to both haunt and deter the already subdued populace from daring to stand up to her. Their lives were teetering on the brink of despair, fear looming over them like some monstrous specter, impregnated with her paralyzing terror. The mere mention of her name was enough to hush the liveliest of trills and turn smiles into grimaces. Her position on the social hierarchy remained formidable, rendering any notion of insurrection futile. The aura of her aristocratic lineage served as an impenetrable fortress, thwarting any attempts to challenge her authority. Despite the flagrant display of her ruthless tyranny, Her actions were met with nothing but subordinated silence. The very institutions meant to uphold justice were rendered effete, unwilling to risk the wrath of an influential noblewoman. Thus, the reign of Saltykova, shrouded in menace and horror, continued to subjugate the realm, sowing seeds of dread in the hearts of the masses. This power she wielded was far from a facade. It was ingrained in the very fabric of her being, revered and feared in equal measure. Her lineage, entwined with the historical mandates that ordained her family's supremacy, was a narrative no one dared to question. The peasantry, paralyzed by the ever-looming specter of her displeasure, toiled beneath the yoke of her omnipresent gaze. Even whispers of dissent were swiftly quelled, the perpetrators finding themselves enveloped in the cold embrace of her vindictive retribution. Thus, despite the murmurings of discontent that permeated the cobblestone streets and the hushed corridors of power, Saltykova's dominion endured, an unchallenged epoch defined by despotic decree and a chilling disregard for the common welfare. Indeed, Saltykova's reign was no fleeting apparition in the annals of history. It was a reign that cast a daunting, inescapable shadow over the lives of those beneath her. With the absoluteness of her authority, she presided over the hapless masses, a monolith of power whose will was command, and whose command was law. Her rule, synchronized impeccably with the inexorable passage of time, showed no signs of faltering. It was a tyrannical ballet conducted in the hushed theaters of governance, where her iron fist fashioned the rhythm to which the orchestrations of control danced. In this realm, that was both her stage and her kingdom, dissent was a forbidden melody, a discordant note lost in the symphony of her dominion. Every proclamation bore the icy touch of her ruthless resolve, chilling the very veins of the populace. To endure was to survive, yet survival came hand in hand with surrender to Saltykova's stringent gospels. Expressions of discontent were smothered even in the cradle of thought, buried in the abyss of enforced silence and unforgotten dread. For it was Saltykova's world they inhabited. They were but puppets swaying to the cold, calculated cadence of her stringent tunes. Promises of a tomorrow beyond her reign were ephemeral illusions lost amidst the fogs of despair-bound monotony. This was Saltykova's age, an era indelibly etched in the bleak chronicles of oppressive rule and suppressed hope. In a state of constant oppression, whispers of rebellion started to develop, supported by the unyielding spirit deep within the oppressed masses. From the shadows, covert alliances arose that defied Saltykova's watchful eyes and powerful command. These courageous individuals, united by their shared suffering, initiated a secret mission towards freedom and hope. Despite the inherent danger, the pursuit of liberty required immense bravery and unwavering faith. The journey to freedom was marked by the sacrifice of those who dared to dream. In this challenging scenario, defiance grew stronger with each act of secret rebellion. Challenging Saltykova's unquestionable rule meant addressing absolute darkness, carrying immense risk. Yet the light of resistance shone brightly, fueling the determination of those yearning to escape despair's grip. Amidst the oppression, a resistant spirit emerged, a spark of change that would eventually overpower Saltykova's reign, heralding a new era of rejuvenation and endless possibilities. In this hopeful light, whispers of revolt began to blend into the fabric of society. Brief glances evolved into shared acknowledgments, and subdued voices became covert communication channels. The gradual erosion of Saltykova's might, much like water lapping against a rock, instilled a palpable sense of collective will, set to ignite imminent change. Standing together against adversity, their unity served as a fortification against aggressive totalitarian rule. Each secret meeting, each deciphered message passed, strengthened their tenacity. Positioned at the edge of a fresher future distanced from a past of despair, they felt the wheels of their revolution begin to slowly turn. As the expected conflict approached, their spirits' courage did not wane but strengthened. Hope was as essential to their quest as the air they breathed. Their relentless chase for freedom became a resounding show of bold resilience that echoed through Saltykova's fortress. Their continued defiance,
Each rebellious act demonstrated their perseverance, all part of the larger quilt of rebellion, a testament to a resolute spirit determined to overcome tyranny. Much like a river navigating obstacles, their spiritual strength remained steady, never losing momentum in the face of unending difficulties. The passion of these brave individuals shone against the oppression they defiantly faced, casting elongated brave shadows across desolate landscapes. Their unity's rhythmic pulse silenced the ongoing oppression, symbolizing their resistance's anthem. The growing unity eventually reached a force that opened up new areas on the map of freedom. Their desire for liberation altered Saltykova's fortress from a symbol of their subjugation to a milestone in their consistent journey towards freedom. The once dreaded symbol of power became a stepping stone to their ultimate victory. Their acts of rebellion formed a coherent narrative, with every protest, transcendental sacrifice, and outcry against injustice becoming a story in the grand tale of their liberation. And the power of their narrative echoed through history's passages, glorifying freedom and resilience against time's test. Each new chapter in this narrative upheld humanity's resilient spirit and reinforced the triumph of truth over orchestrated manipulation.
How did the people's agony finally come to an end, Alex?
After years of terror, a courageous group of victims and witnesses exposed her merciless deeds in 1762. The subsequent investigation uncovered grim evidence of Saltykova's crimes, leading to her arrest and imprisonment. Following the exposure of her despicable acts, the trial of Saltykova commenced, shedding light on the extent of her wickedness. As testimonies from those who suffered at her hands were presented, the courtroom was filled with an air of disbelief and horror. Eventually, the overwhelming evidence against her led to a conviction, marking the end of her reign of terror. Her punishment, however, proved to be relatively lenient considering her offenses. She was sentenced to life in a windowless cell, isolated from the world, but spared the death penalty. This judgment, while bringing closure to her victims and their families, stands as a chilling testament to the atrocities committed by those who abused their power in society. The case of Saltykova came to symbolize a significant turning point in the judicial system, illuminating the grave consequence of manipulation and misuse of power within societal structures. Post her conviction, a sense of bitter relief echoed among those who were tormented by her brutalities and their kin. Conversations started swarming around the unusual leniency of her sentence. Many found it difficult to reconcile the sheer weight of her heinous acts with her punishment, a solitary confinement away from the world, yet alive. The proceedings of her trial and her ensuing verdict began to fuel a wave of public discourse concerning justice and equity, a discussion perpetuated by both common folk and intellectuals alike. This case brought forth the imperfections of contemporary legislation, challenging heretofore accepted norms and triggering a reformative movement in the legal sphere. Endeavors were made to close loopholes in laws, ensure fairness, and enhance the transparency of the system, catalyzed by the horrors unearthed during Saltykova's trial. Reflecting upon these events from the daunting shadow of history, we perceive the case of Saltykova not merely as an incident of horrifying personal wickedness, but also as a stroke of social awakening. A disturbing echo from the past, serving as a forceful reminder of the vigilance and concern required to maintain justice in society. Her case underscores the essentiality to vigilantly guard against such misuse of power, reinforcing the importance of a just and robust system of law enforcement. Pondering on these circumstances from the dense haze of historical chronicles, we interpret the instance of Saltykova not solely as a ghastly act of individual malice, but further as a catalyst of societal transformation. An unsettling resonance from the erstwhile era acting as a potent nudge of the vigilance and communal conscientiousness necessitated to uphold equity in the social order. Her case vehemently highlights the cruciality of maintaining a steadfast watch against such perversion of authority, thereby underscoring the significance of a fair and sturdy system of law enforcement. In revisiting the legacy of Saltykova from the intense obscurity of the yesteryears, we recognize it not just as an embodiment of frightful personal malevolence, but also as an impetus of collective enlightenment. a resonant bugle from bygone days which operates as an emphatic hint of the caution and shared awareness that is imperative to the retention of societal fairness. This episode makes a compelling case for the judicious monitoring against any potential abuse of power and proficiently reinstates the worth of an equitable and resilient framework of jurisprudence. By analyzing these developments under the formidable cloak of antiquity, we regard her situation not just as a case of dreadful individual viciousness, but also as a beacon of social reformation. A haunting reverberation from the antiquity standing as a forceful recall of the watchfulness and shared dedication required to perpetuate social justice. Her case is a poignant testament to the necessity of stepping up our guard against any form of authority misuse, simultaneously reinforcing the value of a balanced and robust law enforcement framework. By delving into the intricate threads that weave the tapestry of her historical context, we further illuminate the paths toward a society where equity and accountability reign supreme. It is as if her chronicle ripples through the epochs, bestowing wisdom upon future generations, an admonition and an inspiration. Her narrative, intricate and formidable, challenges us to confront the enduring specters of injustice and to invigorate the mechanisms that society must employ to safeguard the marginalized and prosecute the transgressors. In her tale, we unearth the profound conviction that justice, when armored with the vigilant eyes of a community, can indeed become an immutable sentinel against the infringements of the powerful upon the powerless.
Let's talk about the outcome of her trial and how justice was served.
During the long trial, Saltykova showed no repentance for her crimes. In 1768, she was found guilty, and while avoiding a death sentence, she spent the rest of her life in solitary confinement, wearing a sign that labeled her as a murderer. Despite the lack of repentance observed in her demeanor, the unfolding of events affected those around her deeply. As the trial reached its end in 1768, Saltykova was deemed guilty for her actions. With the shadow of the death penalty looming over her, she managed to avoid it, however. The ensuing punishment was no less severe. Solitary confinement was her new dwelling, the chilling isolation serving as her constant companionship. A sign that hung around her neck became her new identity, branding her as a perpetrator of heinous acts. This sign, vastly more impactful than any spoken word, served as a silent yet resounding announcement of her guilt. In this lonely exile, she would spend the twilight of her life. It was a stark reminder of the brutal reality of her actions, a form of social shaming, perhaps as oppressive in its own way as any physical punishment. Her sins were laid bare for all to see, and her name will forever remain synonymous with her actions. Vividly marked a murderer, Saltykova served her lengthy sentence in stoic silence, bereft of the liberty she took for granted, a conclusion as striking as it was fitting.
Saltykova unleashed her reign of terror after inheriting vast estates. Her acts of cruelty towards her serfs earned her the nickname Saltychika. Notably, her reign of terror was stopped by Empress Catherine II, leading to Saltykova's conviction for numerous murders and a life sentence in confinement. While Saltykova's heinous crimes tarnished her legacy, her trial marked the start of changing perceptions towards serfdom in Russia, and eventually contributed to the end of the feudal system. Furthermore, Saltykova's trial served as a catalyst for legal and social reforms, highlighting sorrows inflicted on the masses by those exploiting power. Despite her life sentence in solitary confinement, discussions about the unusual leniency of her sentence circulated, leading to significant changes in legislation promoting fairness and transparency.